Hey y'all, it's entry number 32 of this off-season series where we discuss a different player's fantasy value each day as a group. We are another day closer to the start of the 2022 NFL season. Each day we'll drop a name, go through some positives and some concerns of their fantasy profile, and then I'll give my personal opinion at the end. Today's discussion will be on Josh Allen, quarterback, Buffalo Bills. We'll start with the positives with Josh Allen's fantasy profile. To start, we'll talk about his overall consistency. In the 2021 season, Josh Allen only had 2 weeks where he scored under 15 fantasy points. Week 9 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Week 13 against the New England Patriots, where the weather was so horrible that the Patriots only passed the ball 3 times. He had 3 out of 17 games with 15 to 20 fantasy points. 5 out of 17 games with 20 to 25 fantasy points, 3 out of 17 games with 25 to 30 fantasy points, and a whopping 4 out of 17 games with over 30 fantasy points according to fantasy data. Having a guy that you can trust to consistently perform above average each week is huge, and Josh Allen is clearly a guy that you can set and forget in your lineup. The next thing I really like about Josh Allen's fantasy profile is that he's got a bunch of solid offensive weapons. The Buffalo Bills have surrounded Josh Allen with a bunch of solid weapons. He has a true number 1 wide receiver in Stephon Diggs. He has solid supporting wide receivers in guys like Gabriel Davis, Jamison Crowder, and Isaiah McKenzie. He has a tight end who played very well when healthy last year in Dawson Knox, and a strong backup tight end and former first-round pick Oishei Howard. And his running backs are all pretty capable pass catchers outside of maybe Zach Moss, with Devin Singletary, James Cook, and Duke Johnson. Having a bunch of solid offensive weapons makes it easier for Josh Allen to experience fantasy success in 2022. The last thing I really like about Josh Allen's fantasy profile is his good rushing upside. Josh Allen has been pretty good on the ground over the course of his career. In 2018, he carried the ball 89 times for 631 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns in just 12 games. In 2019, he carried the ball 109 times for 510 rushing yards and 9 rushing touchdowns. In 2020, he carried the ball 102 times for 421 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns. And in 2021, he carried the ball 122 times for 763 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. Rushing stats are one of the most important things for a fantasy quarterback's upside, so Josh Allen being one of the best rushers among quarterbacks makes him a much more intriguing buy. Moving on to some of the concerns with Josh Allen's fantasy profile. To start, we gotta talk about how he has a new offensive coordinator. Ken Dorsey will be the Bills' new offensive coordinator in 2022 after their previous offensive coordinator left to become the New York Giants head coach. While it's expected that Dorsey largely keeps the same offense in place since he was promoted from within, there's always some uncertainty when there's a play caller change, and the possibility that Dorsey's play calling results in fewer scoring opportunities for the team compared to Brian Daboll. The next concern I have with Josh Allen's fantasy profile is his mediocre accuracy in 2021. Josh Allen completed just 63.3% of his passes in 2021, which ranked 24th in the NFL according to Pro Football Reference. He was on target for just 74.8% of his passing attempts in 2021, which also ranked 24th in the NFL according to Pro Football Reference. He also posted a pressured completion percentage of 37.8%, the 27th best, a play action completion percentage of 56.4%, 28th best, a red zone completion percentage of 56.6%, 18th best, and a clean pocket completion percentage of 68.7%, 24th best according to Player Profiler. He's elite in almost every other area as a quarterback, but outside of the 2020 season, his accuracy has been a little more average or even slightly below average. The last major concern with Josh Allen's fantasy profile is his average offensive line. At the end of the 2021 season, the Buffalo Bills' offensive line ranked 17th according to Pro Football Focus. Going into the 2022 season, the offensive line is projected to be the 20th best offensive line in the league. They will bring back 3 of the 5 same starters from 2021. Left tackle, Dion Dawkins. Center, Mitch Morse. and right tackle Spencer Brown. The only changes to the starting lineup will be at left guard and right guard. Some additional thoughts on Josh Allen's fantasy profile. Josh Allen was the QB21 in 2018 with 208.1 total fantasy points and 17.3 fantasy points per game. The QB6 in 2019 with 297.5 total fantasy points and 18.6 fantasy points per game. The QB1 in 2020 with 405.2 total fantasy points and 25.3 fantasy points per game. And the QB1 in 2021 with 417.7 total fantasy points and 24.6 fantasy points per game, according to Fantasy Pros. Josh Allen's receivers dropped 5.6% of passes thrown their way, according to RotoWire. In 2020, Josh Allen completed 69.2% of his passes in the regular season, 2 years after he posted a 52.8% completion rate as a rookie in 2018. This was the greatest 2-year improvement in NFL history, according to The Ringer. The 25th best single season in NFL history, according to ESPN, and made him just the 4th quarterback the last 20 years to increase his completion percentage by at least 10 percentage points from one season to the next, according to ESPN. Personal opinion. Josh Allen is currently going off the board as QB1, about pick 24 overall on ESPN, and QB1, about pick 18 overall on Yahoo. I can certainly see why he's the top-ranked quarterback. I mean, he's been the QB1 in each of the past 2 seasons. But at the same time, there's a big opportunity cost taking him at his current ADP, since in order to draft Allen, you need to pass up on some high-quality running backs and wide receivers. Because of this, unfortunately, I probably won't have many shares of Josh Allen in my 2022 fantasy leagues. For each of these entries, we link to a charitable cause or organization. The Patricia Allen Fund benefits the John R. Oishei Children's Hospital. As per the website, after the Buffalo Bills were victorious over Seattle on November 8, 2020, fans discovered that quarterback Josh Allen played the game just after losing his grandmother, Patricia Allen. In support, fans began donating in $17 increments to the Oishei's Children's Hospital, quickly surpassing the milestone amounts within the first week. By the end of 2020, the amount surpassed $1 million, and the story was shared throughout the national media, reaching over 500 million impressions. The Patricia Allen Fund was then developed with the input of Josh Allen and his family to provide ongoing support to the pediatric critical care team. Here's a link to that organization below. And that's it for today's entry. If you enjoyed this entry, be sure to like and subscribe.